Alright folks, my name is Frayne, and today I've got another quick reptile video for you. Recently one of my viewers was kind enough to buy me a day trip out on a keeper experience as a birthday gift. A place called Crocodiles of the World. It was incredibly kind and extremely enjoyable. I'm not going to go into huge detail on anything, and it's not going to be a a vlog format or anything. Reason being that as I was involved in handling and feeding all of the animals for the day, I wasn't really in a position to record anything. I did have my father with me, but he has a habit of recording things in 10-second chunks, which doesn't work out the best. So start the day with a bit of a tour around the place. First up we had Albert and Daisy, a fully grown pair of American alligators. They're both sort of got a slightly warped jaw from prior to their arrival at the zoo. They have done some work to try and correct that, various supplements and such to try and improve it, but they do still have a few teeth that are stuck out at the front in an odd direction. Next up we come to Trig. This is, I believe, a Schneider's dwarf crocodile, if I've remembered correct. He's probably one of the more popular animals amongst the keepers at the zoo. He's particularly intelligent, and they certainly had a lot to say about him. Although the vast bulk of the adults at the zoo are trained on certain commands and will come to their name, as demonstrated by Daisy early on, and these, I believe, Cuban crocodiles, who would go to certain areas of the enclosure when given certain instructions. There's 17 total crocodilian species at the zoo, approximately 150 animals in total, although not all on display. There's 35 Nile crocodiles in this cluster here alone, as well as some more unusual species like this Temistoma, and these that I believe are called Yakari caiman? I can't remember how to pronounce it. Now I don't have videos available of all the animals, sadly, but all the enclosures are indoors, as you'd expect for animals that require heat, and it can get a bit warm. There's also a little colony of day geckos living feral inside the larger crocodile house, so every now and then you spot a little guy hanging out on a sign or a branch. But once the tour was over, we got to spend a bit of time in the VIP room with some of the little babies that were still under monitoring and a few of the smaller species of lizards before we got off to do some handling of our own. So here you can see some American crocodiles. They're about a year old, I think. One of Albert and Daisy's previous clutch. So we get to hold those for a bit. They honestly felt nothing like I would have expected. Their upper scales are practically bone, while the lower, so the underbelly, I would really struggle to describe. It's kind of like a smooth rubber. It's not wet, but it is really, really smooth. Sort of no resistance at all as you run your hand across it. But they were mostly patient, mostly fine with being held. They did squirm a little bit, but as long as you've got a reasonably tight grip, it's fine. And they calm down after a few seconds of being in hand. So after holding the alligators, there was this Temistoma baby, similar age, about a year old, but obviously with that very distinct, long pointed snout. They're more of a fish eater of this species. So next up, we graduated to some 3-year-old gators. Still the spawn of Albert and Daisy, just obviously a couple of years prior to the early one that we held. We were just doing a bit of measuring and weighing, check on their progress, write it all down on a chart for the zoo. Obviously they still have to do their keeper duties each day, we're just there to sort of tag along. There was a bit of resistance to being held down for the measuring. I don't think they particularly liked being flattened out on the ground, they'd rather be up on their feet a bit. But overall they were mostly very calm and clearly used to the presence of people around, as the keepers work with them quite often. Which is this one here that I was tasked with measuring, who's comfortably sitting with his head poking out of a box like a little puppy for the camera. I really like them. I think they're adorable. Father a bit less so, but yeah. I thoroughly enjoyed this part. This is highlight of my year easily. Now we move on to the feeding portion of the day's activities. Again, starting small, working our way up in size. We started with this small little group of Siamese crocodiles being kept in the back room. So go off some hand picking of locusts for them, big tubs. And there were actually 3 of us doing the experience on the day, and I was the last to put my food into the tank with these. So by that point, the crocs had already taken a bit of notice and manoeuvred themselves over by the open door. Thankfully, they weren't quite as eager as Rex to go and grab things out of the food tub. Otherwise, I'd probably have a few more scratches than I started. But it was just really fun watching them try and stalk their food. How long are the locusts going to evade capture? Some of them tried sitting on their heads to avoid it. Varying success. Most of the time, though, when they went, just sat there, splashing around in the corner. If only I could have my own, eh? But sadly not. But on to the next. This is again back with Trig, the Schneider's dwarf caiman. He was a bit more cautious when it came to feeding him. We had to keep the glass almost entirely closed and use a pair of tongs instead. He's being fed on quail here, if you were wondering. It's not a whole quail. We did spend a bit of time with some meat cleavers and lovely bone crunching and squelching beforehand, just to divide it up into smaller chunks. If honestly for no other reason than just give him a little more exercise from having to jump for more than one piece. And weirdly, did you know they can't digest fur, so they actually end up getting fur balls? I didn't know that until then, but apparently so. Final section of the day now before the experience ended, and it became time to feed myself instead. So this time we're back to that big cluster of Nile crocodiles we saw earlier, and we've got a big tub of day-old chicks. Throwing a few in, some on tongs to give them some exercise. It was really surprising to find out just how little they actually eat. We gave them, I think they said approximately 5 times what they would normally be given each day because we were there doing the experience. But that still only worked out to about 1.5 kilos for the entire group. So that's really not a lot. I think they said an adult, like a full grown, will take maybe £5 a week to feed. It's not much at all. I really love the sound of the snapping jaws as they go for it. Like 2 planks of wood being slapped together with a slight echo. Quite surprising to see how far they can jump as well. It's entirely done with the flick of the tail. There's no legwork involved. They're not springing off the bottom. It's just purely flick of the tail and out. They could actually, we were told, they can jump up to the platform that we were standing on if they really want to. Hence why we've got to hold it quite far out. But yeah, overall, I only really have 2 negative points for the day. One is that because of the time of year, the Komodo dragon's enclosure was very messed up and I couldn't get any decent pictures, as that's one of my favourite animals. And the other is that I didn't manage to get any better video footage than I have. Maybe in future I'll be able to go back for there's a full VIP day where you get to handle and feed some of the really big ones, and hopefully go back with a better camera and better camera operating procedure. But it is sadly a little far away from me, so it's not something I can just pop down to for the day. Definitely something I hope I can repeat again in future. So yeah, that's it for this video. Again, it's not really anything hugely informative. Might not be that interesting to most of you. I know my channel is mostly built on games, but the reptiles are something I really love, and somebody paid for me to go on this trip, so I wanted to showcase what I got done for the day. I'd like to start throwing in some more reptile videos when I get the opportunity. Of course, predominantly about my own too, as that's what I've got access to. But in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you next time.